we're going to look at the level 3 games animation VFX synoptic project standardization. So it's going to be kind of a bit of a crash course of kind of all aspects of this. So I'm going to link it in with the qualification structure. We're going to have a look at an overview of what it is, how planning this works, how the units link in for it, how we prepare learner evidence and mapping. I've got some exemplar learner evidence as well in here, looking at the assessment process, IQA reminders, and then closing words of wisdom. So I think I've been doing the qualification as long as it's been going, and it's kind of shaped, changed, and evolved. But the kind of the core of what the synoptic project is has kind of been the same. The delivery and things has just kind of changed. So we're going to look at how it is right now. Cool. So the qualification structure, I think some of these materials are going to be available after the session as well. So some of the links that you'll see in here, there's just links to the qualification handbook. So the final grade that students get is made up of their year 1 grade, the diploma, added to the year 2 grade, the extended diploma, so both worth 50% of their overall grade. The synoptic project is kind of the coursework element. So in year 1, you'll do the asset development portfolio. This is kind of the same kind of sort of coursework element there, taking up the kind of 40% of the year, 20% overall. You also have the exam, which is the case study, which is also worth 40%, and then you have the academic writing, which is the emerging technology. The synoptic project itself has the holistic assessment and has cross-curricular delivery, so I'm going to dive into that a little bit later on. Some of the centres will use the next gen kind of support as well. Other centres will have their own employer engagement, and then all of this translates to your UCAS points at the end. So this is just taken from the qualification handbook there. So what I've got on the screen here again is from the qualification handbook, and this is the units that we cover in the second year. And the reason I've got this in is because you'll notice that at the kind of top, you've got the case study, synoptic project, and the research report there. The case study and the synoptic project share the units. Okay, so within the units themselves, you're going to have your assessment objectives. Some of them are assessed in the case study, and some of them are assessed in the synoptic project there. So I guess the kind of the simplest version of this is case study is a more kind of theoretical, more kind of English focused exam, and the synoptic project is kind of putting it into practical. So you're going to find quite a lot of kind of crossover between these two. However, it is quite clear which kind of assessment objectives your external verifiers are going to be looking to see in the learner evidence for synoptic project and what's going to be coming up in the exam there. Okay, so in terms of a general overview of this, the synoptic project is probably the best assessment on the course. It should be the ultimate fruits of your labor. It's students taking everything that they've learned, bringing it together, and making a product, okay, and making a product as a team. So they're learning the kind of, they're using the skills that they've already learned. So year 1 largely is kind of foundation-based skills, and they're using that to kind of come together and build a game, an animation, or a VFX product there. It should be about building growing independence and teaching learners to manage themselves. So like this can be kind of scary, but I find the more that you kind of adopt this and the more kind of onus that you put on them, the stronger the results you will kind of get out of that. Okay, yeah. So in terms of planning what you're going to do, AIM work with NextGen and other industry partners to provide industry briefs. So you've got two kind of main pieces of documents from AIM to support this. So you've got the synoptic project brief, So this is kind of the overarching brief which links to all of the skills. And then kind of sub to that, there'll be industry briefs that are released typically around sort of November, December time. And then those are the tasks that you would kind of run with there. You can also develop your own ones for this as well, and there's kind of an approval process. So whether that's you're wanting to develop that with local employers or whether you're wanting to develop that with kind of next gen partners and things, that's kind of the other option. So you either take the three briefs, a game brief, an animation brief, or a VFX brief, or you can develop your own, and there's a validation process, and there's deadlines linked to that in the year. For this academic year, we'll obviously be kind of past that and well into that. But in terms of for future reference for next year, you can develop your own kind of industry-led sort of briefs, and those will fit within the the overarching synoptic project brief. When you're developing them, you're going to want to make sure that you're mapping it to the standards, and then the indicative content. So this again is this sort of table that I was showing here. So the briefs that you do develop, they should be allowing learners to achieve the assessment objectives within the relevant units that it shows there. Okay, so that's kind of planning your tasks. As a quick kind of overview and deeper dive into those units, we have images and sounds for Imagine Worlds. This is kind of, I'm going to kind of sort of boil these down a little bit now into what they are. This is your practical element. So this is making, yeah, so using traditional and digital processes to produce art with accompanying sound for an imagined world concept. Okay, so imagined world can kind of throw people, but an imagined world is something that the students have developed themselves. So something that I'll always say to students is that Pac-Man will have an imagined world. There's a list of rules and processes that are involved to define what that world is, what can happen in that world, what it looks like, how it operates. So this is where students take kind of like a skills-based approach. So they're using those skills from the first year. So concept art, 3D art, animation, VFX, programming, and game design. And they're using those skills collaboratively to produce that product. It would include sound as well. So your unit specs will make reference to diegetic and non-diegetic sound, and that will be in your indicative content as well. A way to kind of deliver this as well is to, again, give students ownership. So it might be that they work on whatever project it is as a 3D artist, okay, and then they work with people that are maybe handling the programming and things like that. So there's no requirement that they need to do all of these. So you can kind of almost let them assume roles, and this kind of builds professionalism and gets it kind of closer to industry. Likewise, everyone has had the same kind of education to this point. They've done year one, so everyone should have all of the core skills to be able to build that product. So you might find that although a student is predominantly producing 3D art to contribute to that, they might also do some programming as well. Now, within the overarching exam board provided brief, you've got the mark scheme, but you've also got this record of achievement. And what this has in is it has all of your assessment objectives, if you look on the right, that are pre-ticked for year two. So these are all the ones that link to the Synoptic project, but it also has all of your units from year one as well. So this is where the kind of cross-curricular and specializing comes in. So this is for kind of learners and assessors to kind of complete, to kind of tick and highlight what skills that they have shown. And this should look different for every student. And again, there's no requirement to tick all of these ones here. It's more of like a reflection on how they have contributed to their group project, which helps build kind of ownership there as well. The next unit is production management for the games, animation, and VFX industries. This is all about the kind of, this is essentially being a producer, so the job role producer, and this is about planning, monitoring, tasks and the production over time. So there should be a lot of reflection linked to this, a lot of kind of tracking of how their project is developing, and this is where you should really be building in that independence. So you're teaching them how to manage themselves, so that they're assigning work to themselves essentially, so that they know what they need to do. This is probably one of the sort of hardest bits to do. One of the things that I found particularly useful is that in the sort of September to December window, where you're kind of waiting for the briefs, the industry briefs to be released, doing kind of mock projects then and like teaching them the sort of processes of it, showing them tools that they can use, and kind of starting to build confidence. So this kind of almost gives them like a sort of almost like a safe space to fail, is what I kind of sort of look at it as. So it gives them like a test run prior to getting them, and you can build up their confidence so that when they get to the Synoptic project, they can plan their own provisions and know what they need. They can coordinate it themselves. They understand how long things take and like when to schedule things. They're already used to using industry standard documentation, and then looking at post-production activities. So post-production in the run up to kind of finishing up polishing the project, looking at that kind of quality assurance side of things, but also potentially planning for like internal exhibitions and showcases. So a lot of kind of standard industry standard documentation that a lot of people use. I put some kind of links in here. So Trello is an asset list kind of management system. It links to kind of Kanban quite a lot, but people use it in different ways. Hack and Plan is, again, another really good sort of online resource, very visual. It's production management designed for games. Standard production schedules in Excel, burn down charts, really great to kind of show students that updating how many tasks have been completed versus how many they expect to be completed. And that's something that they can showcase on their blogs weekly to show kind of where they are at, whether they're behind, whether they're not. This is where Agile and Scrum will start to come in. So this is named in the units as well. And again, it's kind of a huge area. Scrum being a typical kind of implementation of Agile. But if they're doing Agile right, you should find that each kind of student manages their project slightly different. And again, this would come from them kind of experimenting and things. Next unit, working in the games, animation, and VFX industries. So this is kind of more operational now. So be able to work effectively to an industry brief. So yeah, as the Synoptic project has kind of changed over the years with the exam boards, the one thing that has kind of standardized is that the industry briefs are provided, or you've got your approved tasks. So the work that students are doing should link back to that brief. So they should be able to reflect on what they are doing and how that links to the brief that they have been set and the kind of requirements there. And again, this is reflective of what you would be doing in industry as well. Knowing the core principles of Agile and Scrum. So this is where we see it named in our assessment objectives as the kind of most common implementation of Agile in the industry. So Scrum, again, has a whole framework. I'm not going to go into it now, but it does provide a really good structure, and you could even plan kind of your lessons around the Scrum framework and kind of the sprint cycle. And then be able to work effectively in a team on a time-constrained project. So this, again, will be learner reflection on how things are going. This is going to one of the things that I find kind of every year is teaching learners to manage conflict. So I would encourage students to come to you with stuff that they are worried about. The most common one being, John Smith isn't doing any work on our project. Okay, and it's then about teaching them how to manage that conflict in a professional manner and then reflect on that there, rather than kind of jumping in and sort of solving it for them. Obviously, there will be some instances where you may need to do that and jump in and to help stuff, but it will kind of depend on that. I'll always, in a kind of a first instance, try and teach students how to and advise on how to kind of manage that, because although this project is about building a product, it's about how they build that product. So there may be students getting distinctions that have not had an easy road, but the way that they're managing, reflecting, implementing agile, responding to what's happening might be really professional there and might lead them to that. So it is about the outcome. The outcome is the thing that the students are going to see, but it's more about the process and the journey that they're kind of going to be going on to. Storyboarding and playboarding. So what we're looking at here is largely kind of pre-production focused phases. A way that you could do this is through a pitch. So an idea of a task that you could run with students on this project is, rather than starting students off as in groups, is to run an independent phase where students are pitching ideas. This is a really good chance to get kind of industry involved as well and get students to pitch their ideas, showcasing them visually through storyboards or playboards, and presenting those to an audience, which is named in SP4 here. So be able to present a storyboard or playboard to an audience. So that pitching phase allows them to kind of share their ideas, to feedback on each other's stuff, and to kind of showcase their idea, and then perhaps you might group them from there. This is about kind of them visualizing their project or paper prototyping. Playboarding is typically a word that's not quite as I guess commonly understood. So I've got kind of a couple of visuals here that I think are really good examples of playboards. So the reason this came about is because for animation and VFX pieces, a storyboard is fairly typical. You can plan the flow of your project, quite linearly and easily visually, whereas a game doesn't necessarily flow like that. So think of it more like paper prototyping and visualizing how maybe a player might interact with that, what they might do. So this might include kind of mock-ups of menu flows, mock-ups of how mechanics might work in games. This one on the right looks like for some kind of scientific game sort of thing, but I like how you can clearly see that this is a touchscreen focused product, so a mobile focused product here, and they're showing how actions and how the player will, or the user will, connect to that. So playboarding, not quite as standard as storyboarding, but it's again the same idea. It's visualizing the project there and kind of showing that in the kind of the early stages. So again, SP3, be able to use traditional and digital processes to produce a storyboard or playboard, and then we're presenting that to our audience. So those are the units there. You've got kind of your practical, you've got production management, you've got working in the industry in a professional way, and then you've got storyboarding and playboarding there. So those are your kind of four corners, your four units of the project. So when you're creating learner evidence, this is going to be over a longer period of time. So this is their their final major projects that we might have done at university and things like that. It's that on a level 3. So the way that you guide learners to prepare their evidence is really important, and it's something that you should spend a decent amount of time thinking about, particularly with how you're going to present it to EV as well. So your EVs are going to want this clear and easy to locate, so that when you give them the learner evidence, it makes sense, and they're going to be able to see all of this evidence from all of these all of the units that we've just talked about easily on the blog, and they can understand how you have done that there. So ideally, it should be mapped. And what I'd recommend you to do is to give learners this responsibility to kind of map the evidence so that you're sharing the units with them, you're sharing the learning outcomes, and you're getting them to understand it and getting them to reflect on it and understand the codes. I've got some kind of examples to show you of that in a second. You might be using online blogs, so it's a recommended way to use kind of online blogs, but this could also be done through Word documents that you get kind of submitted. The way I see the learner evidence is it's kind of like a developer's diary. So it should show the start of the project, and it should be like a narrative going through showing all evidence for all of these units here, and that should be over time. Because this is a longer project, we should be considering the quantity that learners are putting in as well, and it should be reflective of the time that they've had on that project. The grading should be individual as well, so I'd try and avoid group grading, and really getting this over to learners and making sure they understand that what they show on the blog is what they've contributed to that project, and this will make your lives a lot easier as well. And this then promotes that ownership, so they know that they can't just put everyone else's work on and sit back, because it's going to be really obvious. You'll be able to read their reflections and see their kind of narrative. You should be able to see their production management probably on a weekly basis and how they're kind of tracking and managing that project. So to go a bit more into learner evidence, there's some examples here. So you can see in the kind of the pink boxes, this is what we mean by kind of mapping the evidence, so that learners are kind of understanding the units, understanding the assessment objectives, and almost like tagging them in. And this makes it really clear. And it shows the students understand kind of what they're learning as well. So here we've got a Scrum sheet, so a template that we'd prepared for students here, and they're linking that to their production management. We've got some individual work down here. So this kind of green text in the bottom left is some practical work. So they're linking that to the images and sounds for Imagine Worlds. And then on the right, we've got some more production management, and they're linking it to the sort of specific ones that are relevant for those. So the more you can kind of put on the learners, the easier your life will become as well, because you then don't need to map all of this and understand how it works, and then you'll be able to track this in your formative feedback and checks that you're doing throughout the project. Okay, so I've got some exemplar blogs to show at the moment at different levels to kind of get a really quick kind of understanding of what learner evidence could look like. I'm just going to have to stop sharing this one and share a new one. Okay, can you guys see this? My PDF viewer should have Synoptic Project. Okay, I can see there's a few questions in the chat. I'll dive into those at the end. Cool. So I've got 3 examples here. So I've got a pass student here. This is quite a strong pass, and I'm hoping once you see the other ones, you'll kind of see why it is. You can see right away this student's taking the assessment objectives, putting them in. So they put them in at the top, and then from then on, they start to use the codes here. I'm going to scroll through at a relatively decent pace, just because there's going to be quite a lot of stuff here, and hopefully this will help you see kind of a loose overview. So what you're seeing here is the students kind of pitching phase, where they were kind of independent. They're then diving into their project, where they're narrating what's happening, talking about it. They're showing production management. They're now starting to show some practical stuff. This was a website downloaded, so you're going to see some slightly strange artifacts here and there, and these videos aren't going to play. But you can kind of see we're getting some production management that they're doing, some more production management. We then start to get some Scrum sheets showing that discussion in their teams. We have some game design documents. We move into more production. Okay, and then we end here with a kind of final part. Okay, so this would be over about 5 months sort of thing we're looking at here. I'm going to hop over to the merit one now. Again, I think these documents are going to go up online because they're fully redacted, so you can have a little bit of a deeper look into what's happening. So we've got the merit student here, and we're primarily looking at the differences. So we've got, again, the individual kind of phase here in the pitching, where students exploring their own ideas. They're showing practical elements of that as well as they try to kind of communicate this. We're starting to see a little bit more depth into their writing and the kind of the number of visuals that they're showing. You'll start to notice that the production management is featuring a little bit more frequently. We've got a few little inconsistencies in some of the depth of their reflections, and this would then go into your feedback. But generally, on the whole, we're seeing a bit more of kind of an active involvement. I can see how this student's contributing to the project and the main kind of skills that they're putting in. And, you know, our length is a little bit longer here as well. Okay. So that was our kind of merit example. Again, we've got sort of a little conclusion at the end with a kind of video trailer showcase sort of thing. This is our kind of distinction example. So same thing again, use of those and understanding of those, the units and the assessment objectives. There's a few horrible big gaps in the way that it downloaded these websites. It looks a little bit nicer online. Yeah, okay, so this person's taken their pitch and it's kind of really analyzed and broke down and backed up the kind of the theory behind what they're doing and really kind of explaining it. I'm going to go quite a lot faster through this one and stop at various points just because it's quite a lot longer here. So again, we're getting our Scrum sheets. Here, we're getting reflection on those Scrum sheets. This person's talking about what they're doing and how they're solving things. They're using dates as well, which is really useful. Going to move a bit more into production. So this person's starting to get into the last one started to do it, but a bit more of a cycle with how they're updating their blog and how we're seeing kind of the scrums, the production management sort of regularly featuring throughout. This person's again consistently sort of tagging those. So you'll find that maybe some of your weaker students, although you're encouraging them to use the tags, might not be, you know, your higher level students should be showing that kind of higher level of understanding. So this person's doing it kind of consistently throughout. So we're seeing lots of kind of practical work here. We're seeing how they're contributing to their project. We're seeing their individual contributions. We're seeing the wider project as well. Just trying to find a decent bit here. I'm hoping we're starting to get the point with this one here anyway, and how thorough and kind of detailed that this person has been, how they're being consistent with their project management. So when it comes to grading, I'm sort of taking all of those things into consideration. Again, the reason why these images are cut off is because it's a website turned into a PDF. Yeah. I'm going to see if there's any questions on those evidence things at the moment. Okay. Yeah, like I said, these are going to be available to you guys, so you can have a little look at these in a bit more depth rather than me scrolling through, just because it'll take a decent bit of time. But I'm hoping that showed at least kind of a range in the evidence that you might see, and again, thinking about how long the the project is running for. Let me just hop back to PowerPoint. Okay. Okay, awesome. So, when it comes to assessment, it should be holistic. So you're looking at their whole blog, you're looking at the quality of the work that they're contributing from each of those units. So how strong is their practical work? How are they building that imagined world? How are they contributing to that project? How thorough and are they being on their project management? Do they understand their project management? Are they using it? Are they showing that they understand what project management is, or are they just doing it because you've told them to? Okay, and then your formative feedback should be enforcing this. So if they've got great practical outcomes, but their project management is almost non-existent, then you'd be guiding them to that, showing what they should be doing for that. It should be evidence-based, so it should be individual. So you need to be really aware of where students might just be showcasing everyone else's work. So it might be that actually you look through a student's blog and it's like, oh, this is what Jimmy's done, this is what Sarah's done, this is what Bob's done. But actually, what can we see from what that person's done? There shouldn't really be a need to show anyone else's work, other than if you're maybe using it. So if you're working with concept artists that are then translating something into 3D, or if maybe you're showing the full project, so how your work fits in with the full project. But this is why the learner reflections are going to be so important, because they need to be articulating this. So if they're using someone else's work, they should be highlighting it and explaining how they're going to be using it, where it's going next, and then showing that pipeline. Okay, if you're kind of just seeing all different aspects of the project and people aren't being clear of what's being done, that would be then time to kind of intervene and guide them on how they should be doing it. Because ultimately, within a group, you could have somebody getting a distinction and someone getting a pass, or someone getting a fail, sort of thing, depending on how well they're contributing. And because it's such a long project, this is why it's so important that you're having those formative checks and you're looking at how they're evidencing the work that they're doing. And again, this is where I find mock projects prior to the Synoptic project really help, because it is slightly different to the way that they're evidencing their year one work. They are becoming more independent. So I feel like they do almost need that safe space to kind of learn and fail almost. Your assessment should clearly show how a final grade has been reached, and I've got an example in that. So ultimately, when you fill in your ERACs, you're going to put one grade for the Synoptic project. It's going to be a pass, a merit, or a distinction. Okay, so your formative feedback, again, because the project's so long, it should evidence that. So your EVs are going to want to see like why that person has got that particular grade at the end. That obviously should be consistent with the other grades that you've awarded other learners as well, and it should be reflective of the time spent on the project. So your feedback that you're giving to students, so the written feedback, needs to show how and why they've achieved that grade. Within the exam board provided mark scheme, you've got this mark sheet. So where I showed you earlier where you could tick what skills they've achieved, this is in there as well, and it kind of clearly defines the quality, and this links directly to the units as well. So your project management, use of creative and technical skills, response to the brief. So you've got kind of parameters to work with to kind of tick and highlight where students are, and then this should result in a final grade. So just underneath this, the kind of the image on the right, you'll have your final feedback, and you'll have your overall grade here. So this overall grade should be really clear. It wants to be obvious what grade you're giving that student for that final project, and that should relate to the grades that you're putting on your ERAC as well. An example of a way that you could potentially show progress over time. This is something that I developed and I put into our kind of mark sheet and the feedback that we present to our EVs. There are loads of different ways that you could do this, but the top two rows are mock synoptic projects that we've ran with students, and then you've got synoptic project broken down into various different phases here. So there's the pitch, the pre-production, minimum viable product, and this is kind of like quality at different points with kind of dates, and then we've got the kind of the final grade where it's achieved at the end. So your formative feedback should be guiding students for what they should be doing on their project. This kind of helps you see and will help your EV see like how they've got to that final point there, and how that progress is kind of tracked over time. It doesn't need to be in this format at all. It could be an Excel sheet, and you've got trackers. You might want to set milestones for your students and really link it in with industry. But yeah, like showing progress over time is something that your EVs will be interested in, to know that that final grade that you're giving to them, how it actually was achieved. Okay, last document I'm gonna show here. Okay. So this document here is kind of like an adapted version of the AIM version, the AIM brief that I've kind of taken, and shows you kind of like how I've kind of organized everything together. So I've got student name and blog link right at the top, so that I'd have one of these documents per student, and that would link everything together. Our EV has everything there. We've then got that record of achievement that exists, which I mentioned earlier. We've got that mark sheet, which I just referred to. And then what I've got here is a very kind of almost like an expanded version of like grading over time. So we've got the mock projects and the feedback that they were achieving. So that's this WarioWare and Imagine Worlds. We then go into the synoptic project, and again, we're dated at various points here, and the feedback's kind of flowing. We go a little bit further, we've got the kind of final grade they would achieve. So it'll be, again, really clearly highlighted. And then we've got the learner evaluation and all of your declarations at the end here. So this one document would have everything in that an EV would need, and they'd be able to see that progress. I've seen other people that would use, Excel sheets and things like that. You want to make sure that it's everything I've been highlighting has been shown. Everything that is on this mark sheet is used in the way that you're using assessment to kind of round off and finally grade your students there. Okay, so again, that's just an example of how it's kind of all been tied together into one document, and I did that over a few years to try and consolidate all the multiple documents that I was using. Let's hop back into PowerPoint. Okay. Okay, cool. So we've covered planning, we've covered what the content is, we've looked at assessment. Your kind of last little bit here is your IQA pipeline. So this is your internal quality assurance, which you should be super familiar with. Your EVs are going to be expecting, your full IQA pipeline, so your yearly assessment and IQA plan showing when your assessments are scheduled, who's assessing them, who's doing the IV, how the holistic assessment is being approached. That should be really clear. So this document, I can't stress the importance enough of, and this shows how you're planning to assess your students over the year. And that's going to, having that is going to fill your EVs with confidence that you know what you're going to do and how your final grade is going to be assured from a quality point of view. Your tasks are going to be internally verified. So this is, this should include your AIM briefs and next gen briefs as well. Even if you're using an exam board brief, you should have your own dates and structure to your assessment in there. So that should be internally verified. You'll have your standardization activity across the year, showing how you as a team are standardizing the approaches that you're taking to assessment, as well as the assessment itself, and how that holistic assessment is being approached. You'll have your formative feedback, your summative feedback, and then you'll have the IQA of that feedback and those assessment decisions. All of these documents from the IQA pipeline, you can find templates for on the AIM website, or you may have your own kind of forms that you need to use as part of your center, which is also completely fine, so long as you're showing the same kind of processes there. There shouldn't be a need to do any duplication. Yeah, your EVs will guide you if you're not including certain types of information or certain things are missing from your IQA pipeline. So yeah, more of a reminder there from IQA. Quick reminder on MIA. So MIA is where all your reports are being done now. I'm not going to go too in depth into this. I know there's been loads of training sessions on these, but MIA is kind of like the most active place where your EVs will be engaging and storing everything with you. Any actions you might have are going to be there, as well as your actual reports themselves. So if you don't have any EMEA account at the moment, you can get in touch with inquiries, and one will be able to be arranged for you, as well as your EVs will be guiding you towards that. Other little reminders kind of for the end of year, destination data, so where your students are going after the course. So your EVs are going to be looking for that. How you're engaging with employers, whether that's next gen or whether you're using your own employers, there should be some kind of log showing how you're engaging with those. Yeah, the rest is kind of typical stuff, making sure you're registering your learners, or your departments and your colleges are, you're registering for your exams, you're responding to your EV requests, in timely manners to be able to do your interim or your final EVs. And yeah, you're using MIA there. My sort of last closing words of wisdom, I guess, from running the project is it can be scary because it is a long project, and I'm saying a lot of this is about kind of fostering their independence. You want to manage that risk through your assessment design. So there's mock synoptic projects, micro versions of the synoptic project. I found as soon as we started introducing those rather than diving right in, that's where I started to see a real difference in the student work and the quality of the learner evidence that was coming out. If you can almost give them that sort of safe space to fail, to explore, and then to give them more opportunity for feedback as well, then you're going to be strengthening them overall. This was particularly useful for us during lockdowns as well, particularly the first lockdown, because we were able to use these kind of mock synoptic projects that would run the full kind of assessment pipeline on as evidence to support our tag grades. So you may have students that, I don't know, get ill or extenuating circumstances for an extended period of time. If you've done some of these mock things, that's going to make things a little bit easier for you when it comes to claiming as well. Do you foster that independence, teach them to manage themselves, treat them as professionals, and try and replicate that industry working environment? Like I said at the start, this should be the ultimate fruits of your labor. There should be loads of cool products that you can, cool animations, cool VFX pieces, games that you can play at the end of this. So yeah, treat it like that. Teach them to manage conflict. Keep an eye on it. Potentially use discipline specialization, so let them assume job roles: 3D artist, programmer. It doesn't need to be so like confined, but you're then fostering them to develop depth in that one area, and then this should hopefully lead them to the choices they're going to make for their next steps, whether that be jobs, whether that be university courses and things like that. So we go from the broad first year to the specialized second year. Pitching is great. I recommend grouping learners yourself. So we actually use a voting system. So when students vote, when students pitch, we get them to vote. So I tally all their votes up so I can see what projects they want to go forwards there. But if you let them group themselves, it doesn't necessarily always lead to the best results. So yeah, I use some mock projects to let them group themselves, and then when it comes to the synoptic project, we group them, and then you find that actually they don't all want to work with their friends because they don't all have the same work ethic and things. Treat those blogs or the evidence like a developer's diary, so showing the progress over time. Peer reviews are great as well to support your assessment decisions. So getting students to review each other. If one person ranks themselves a 10 and then all the other students in the group are ranking them as a 1, that can support your assessment decisions, as well as staff statements, observation of assessment as well, to support those kind of final grades. And yeah, I'd recommend having a big exhibition at the end, a big kind of celebration of everything that they've achieved. On the course there. Cool. Um, this is my last slide here. So thank you for listening to that overview and standardization of Synoptic project. I'm going to dive back through the chat and see if I can see any questions. I'm pretty sure the slides are coming out afterwards along with those docs. I absolutely flew through those docs, so you might want to have a little look at those, particularly to help with grading. How does that work with SEN students from James? What was that in relation to? Was that with fostering the independence and things there? With students managing workloads. Yeah, so I would look at it as an ideal. So every student's going to have completely different needs, and every student will need support. And just like you would support them on any other project to access the information, it might be that actually you work with that student, you break down the tasks, because you should be able to guide them for how that should feed into project management. But yeah, it definitely would be like you're showing the standard which you want students to achieve to, but you're going to know your students better than everyone and how they work and things like that. Yeah, like in our center we have quite a high proportion of students with autism and things like that that do the course. I think that's quite common across all centers and things. So it's you're going to need to break things down differently for people. You should still have your lesson structures that are guiding them through this project. It's not a case of like just letting them go and doing it, but you're wanting to build that growing independence. This is also kind of preparing them for next stages of education where university is likely to be a bit more open, but yet you're definitely going to have your own students which have their own needs. So you would disseminate that from there, so you'd have the base kind of level that you're guiding everyone to get to, but you're going to have the support that's going to guide them to that as well in your delivery. You said it was holistic, yeah, it ends up being determined by mark to determine the grade. So in terms of holistic, what we're meaning here is it's holistic across the areas. So you are defining it, but you're defining it based on a holistic approach. So if I hop back to that marking guide, where did I have that? Yeah, am I still sharing? Yeah. So you're going to get a holistic approach here. You're getting holistic from the course, from the skills that they've built up, but then you're going to get holistic across their project management, their response to the brief, their use of technical and creative skills, the ability to bring knowledge together, and the way that they review and reflect on their work. So you might have some students that actually are struggling with the writing side of things, or if you do have students that struggle with writing, maybe they prefer to speak. Maybe they could do video blogs as well to get the same kind of input in there. But if their review is weaker, but their technical skills are higher, this is going to take the holistic approach to assessment. This is kind of more what I mean, if that makes sense, Julian.
Hi, Matt.
Hey,
Sorry, do you hear me all right?
yeah, I can do.
Yeah, so obviously where I was looking at the marking grid, so if they're given a holistic approach, say, across the year in that particular sort of sector, should I say,
Yeah.
let's say it was on pre-production planning.
Yep.
So are you then looking at what they've done holistically across the year to show their growth in order to then determine whether, like, they might have started off as a pass level, but then where they've done 2 or 3 of the, sort of practice projects before coming to the synoptic project, and then they've shown obviously how they've grown across each of them towards the end one in order to give them a holistic overall grade for that section.
Yeah, I would do. I do tend to confine the synoptic project to the synoptic project, but you definitely should see growth over time. If you look at the distinction example afterwards, the review section, the reflection of his stuff is good, but it probably starts off around a merit, and then my formative feedback throughout that synoptic project kind of improves there. So like I would then holistically look at his blog and how he has reviewed holistically across that. So it is over time. So it's that's why you'd have that, I guess, that formative feedback, and then your summative is at the end. So when I do the summative review, I would look over their entire blog again. I'm not like sectioning it off, sort of thing. So the formative feedback, it gives them a chance to actually action that feedback there. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, and then in order to show an improvement, obviously further down the line. Okay.
Yeah, and that links in with the like progress over time as well. Like if you're showing how you're tracking their progress over time, with whatever system that you use, sort of thing. Yeah, because we're evaluating, assessing these skills that they've got. The mock project isn't a requirement. It's just what I kind of I'd recommend, sort of thing. I found it worked for us, so it was more of a bit of advice, sort of thing. But it kind of, that prepares them, and then the synoptic project, it is kind of like a test, I guess. So they get those, those industry briefs. The skills that they're doing are pretty much the same. But yeah, they're doing it on that
Once they've
project.
done a demonstration of it, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's just more because obviously this is our first year delivering the second year, our year 2. So hence, obviously, we've been through the year 1, and obviously last year, like you said, there was a few obviously tag grades, which obviously influenced the learners' work. And we had to use previous projects that they were working throughout the year that they did do, because not obviously everything could get done because of various obviously disruptions and everything with COVID and
Yeah,
stuff last year. So Yeah, so we had to use those to draw on, obviously determining the grades and stuff. So I was just, just wanted to double check where it was
Yeah,
going for this second year.
I've seen, because Synoptic Project typically comes out around like late November, December sort of thing. We typically start it in January. I find that if you give students too long on it, you don't get like necessarily more quality anyway. But every student will be different. I've seen some centers that like focus more on the units before before they do the synoptic project, so they might really explore storyboarding and pre-production and do it like that. Like, it'd be up to you and your learners and what you think would prepare them best for it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Cool. I can see Alfie asked a question, but also Alfie's left, and we are also 2 minutes over now.
That's part of my team.
Sorry? Okay.
It's part of my team. So, if what did he say about? Yeah, he was saying about the example of work. Will you be able to share?
Yeah, that's all going on. So it's all been redacted. So yeah, you can have a little kind of look at that there. I find that a lot of learner evidence can look a little bit different. And again, you are trying to take that sort of holistic approach. Like I said, some students, one of the most common ones is that they'll be really strong at the making and they'll just show off making, but that isn't meeting all of the needs sort of thing.
Not being able to explain the reasons why they're doing what they're doing, and and the various
Yeah,
techniques that they're inputting into it whilst doing it, sort of to demonstrate their knowledge and their background.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, the Synoptic project is a lot sort of thing. Again, it was quite a lot to cram into this kind of session now sort of thing, but I hope at least I've given you guys sort of a little bit of an insight, for particularly if you're a kind of a fresh starter with it there. Can we get a copy of your process so we know we're approaching this correctly? Yeah, I mean, it might be better to maybe get in touch with perhaps Sally or somebody at AIM, and I'd be happy to maybe have like kind of follow-up calls or anything like that, or emails and things. Um, I'm quite keen to, like, there isn't like one way of doing things, and it wants to work to your center, and this is what your EVs are going to be looking for as well. Ultimately, it will kind of funnel down to, your assessment and it meeting those skills, sort of thing. But the way that you get to that point and the way that you do it, it can be quite sort of a personal thing. And like, a lot of the stuff I've tried to share is sort of what I've built up over time. I also work as an indie developer as well, so it's kind of like trying to get that professional process into what students are doing and move it as far away, or not as far away from education, but like getting them thinking it's a working environment. They're making stuff, they're following those processes there.
Yeah, as real to industry as you can possibly make it, basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
they
and then
think more as an industry project rather than, oh, this is my college project.
100%. Yeah, and then like it takes some time, but I noticed that our students and like comments we've had from universities is that they're often like way more advanced than other students coming from other level 3 courses there. So yeah, I think like the structure of the quality is really strong, and it does promote that kind of quite high level. And again, like hopefully the stuff that I've showed, there is a lot to it, but you definitely can get students there, and you can get them producing stuff, and it should be a really cool project.
Okay. All right. That's great from me, Matt. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Okay, I think we're done. Thank you for everyone for listening.